Hi guys, in this video we are going to be creating this fully animated landing page in Figma. As soon as I refresh, you can see this smooth animation on the elements such as the text, the navbar, and on the images. You can see the motion on the images, which we are going to learn how to achieve. And as soon as I scroll, you can see this really smooth scroll review on the next section. As soon as I scroll, you're going to get this scroll review on the next section. And you can do that for all the sections on your landing page, which is super amazing. If you're looking to create a more engaging and interactive website in Figma, make sure you stick around to the end of this video. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell if you find any of my videos helpful. And without further ado, let's get started. So to get started with our web animation, I'm going to be making use of this cryptocurrency landing page. Here, I already duplicated this file, and I'm going to leave the link to this particular file in the description section so that you can just go ahead and copy this if you want to follow along with the same file. But if you're using your own design, it's going to be the same technique. You're just going to apply the similar concept from this into your own personal design. But anyways, I'm going to leave the link to the description so that you can grab this if you want. So here, I'm just going to select this landing page, which is the completed file here. I'm going to select this, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to open up a new file that I just created here. You can see untitled, it has not been named, and I'm just going to rename this to web animation. Then I'm going to paste in the landing page that I copied from the community file that we are using here. So here we have the landing page. The first thing I want to do is if I go ahead and click on prototype from here on the landing page, I'm just going to hit on the prototype button so that we can preview this in the prototype mode. Right. And as you can notice on the prototype menu, the first thing I want to do is to make sure I take away this space on the left and on the right so that when we are showing the prototype of the animation, it looks really clean and professional. So what I'm going to do to get this fixed is to go back to our landing page. And as you can see, this landing page is using the default width of 1440, which is appropriate if that is your desktop width, but mine is currently using a width of 1680. So what I'm going to do is to hit K on the keyboard, or you can come here and switch to the scale tool by yourself by hitting K. Then I'm just going to come to the edge of this particular design, and I'm going to click and drag until I've gotten my figure. I'm going to be looking at this scale here. When I've gotten something close to 1680, I'm going to stop. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to keep dragging until I get to something really close to 1680 or 1680 itself on the dot. Okay, so yeah, this is it. I've gotten 1680. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And once I switch back to the prototype mode and I refresh by hitting R, you can now see that this particular landing page now takes the full width. I like to view this like this so that it gives a more cleaner view or a more professional view when you're prototyping your designs, and we can have a really nice experience when we are prototyping the design. So this is the first thing I'm going to do. Now that we've done this, I'm now going to go ahead to start creating a prototype. Good. So now, what's the first thing to note when you want to prototype an entire landing page? The very first thing to note is when you select this landing page, and you come to the layers panel here and open up this landing page, you're going to notice that every single section here have been grouped into a frame. As you can see here, we have the header. This is a frame. We have this block 1, which is the hero section. It's also in a frame. We have the second section here, which has these cards, is in a frame. So that's the first thing you want to do. If you're not using this design file and you're using your custom design, you want to make sure you have all your sections in a frame instead of just laying them down on your desktop frame just like that. You want to categorize them in the frame. You can see how this frame takes up the entire width of this artboard. You want to make sure you do that. So for this particular design, the first thing I'm going to do is to make sure that this hero section, I'm going to rename this block 1 to hero section, also contains the header. So I'm going to click on this header and I'm going to drag it into the hero section. Now, once I select this header, you can see that it stops here, but I want it to scale to the top of this page. So I'm going to hit V back on the keyboard or switch back to the move tool, come to the edge here, hold down Command or Control if you're using a PC, then click and drag to the top here just so that I can increase the frame to fill the entire section. Once I have done this, what I now want to start doing is to start creating an animation on this hero section. So what you can do is to create a duplicate of this by holding down Alt or Command, clicking and dragging out. So from here, we can now start creating our animation on each of the sections. We're going to understand once we start creating the animation itself. But for this duplicated section, we are going to start working with this. First thing we are going to take note of is you can see the text in the middle here is contained in a different frame, and this text is using auto layout. So first thing I want to make sure that we do is to take away the auto layout frames. I want us to use regular frames. So for all the frames, I'm going to come to this auto layout section and uncheck or remove this auto layout frame. So if you're using an auto layout frame, it's best you use a regular frame, right? You can use your auto layout frame to lay out your object, but at the end of the day, you want to leave it as a regular frame when you want to start prototyping. Auto layout could work, but it is better you leave it as a regular frame. So for all the auto layout frames here, as you can see, I'm going to come here also and I'm going to remove it. Now we have two sections. We have the section that holds the text, and we also have the section that holds this button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this section that holds the text, right click, and here I'm going to ungroup. So it's going to remove the frame from it. Now we have only one frame that holds all the text. So after making this particular text all contained in a single frame like this, the next thing I want to do from here is to create an animation in this text section. And in order to do that, what I want to do is I want to create an animation on each of these texts, the first line, second line, and this subtext, and including the button. So first, I'm going to select this first line of text at the top here. I'm going to copy it, come down here, and paste this just like this. Once I have this pasted, I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to frame selection. Once I frame the selection, I'm going to take note of the height of this frame, which is 129. And then I'm going to select the text that is inside the frame, and I'm going to come to the y-axis and give it a figure of 130 or 129. You can now see that the position of the text is now like below the frame. If I come here and switch from show content to clip content, we won't see the text again because the text is overflowing out of the frame we just created, which is the first concept we want to understand. So I'm going to switch it back to show content so that we can see what we are working with. I'm going to select this frame again, hold Alt or Option and duplicate. Then I'm going to come to this second line of text. I'm going to copy this just like this, and I'm going to replace this. So here we have frame 1 and frame 2. What we then want to do from here is to go ahead to clip its contents because we don't need to see them anymore. So once I've clipped the content, I'm going to select both of these, frame 1 and frame 2, and I'm going to hit Shift A to create an auto layout on them. I'm going to turn this to 0 because I don't want any spacing, and I'm going to go ahead to remove the auto layout from it. Once I have this, I'm going to copy this, which is this entire frame here, select this text frame that we have, right click, paste to replace. So what we just did here is to replace that text position with what we just created here in this frame 3. And as you can see, it's like aligned to the left. So I'm just going to go ahead to move it to the center a little bit, which is okay. So once you have this, I'm going to select this frame that we created here, and I'm just going to take it to, let's say, the top of the artboard where we can't really see it. So it doesn't tamper with our design. And what we can do again from here is to create something similar for the subtext. So I'm going to select the subtext, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to frame selection. You are going to take note of the height, which is 56. We can round it up to 60 pixels. I'm going to select the text inside, and for the y-axis, I'm going to change it to 60 pixels so that I can change the positioning. I'm going to select this and also clip its content. I'm going to do the same thing for the button. I'm going to right click. I'm going to frame selection. I'm going to take note of the height, which is 65. I can round it up to 70. I'm going to select this button inside the frame that we just created, the button content, and come to the y-axis and make this 70. Select the frame that we just created and also clip its content so that we hide the overflow. Once we've done this, we've created the first state of our animation. So what we can do from here is to select this entire hero section, come to this component, create components, and we are trying to achieve an interactive component. So we are going to create another variant of this component. Once you have another variant, what we want to do is to go to the second variant and revert it to the initial state of things. So here I'm going to start from the first frame that we created, open the content of this first frame, and revert the positioning back to 0 so that it is now in its initial position and we can see the content. I'm going to go to the second frame, open it up, select its content, revert this back to 0. I'm going to do the same thing for the subtext, select its content of the frame, come here, revert it back to 0. I'm going to do the same thing for the button, select the button, select the content of the button itself, come here and revert it back to 0. So once we have this, we can now go ahead to create our prototype. And to create our prototype, I'm going to switch to the prototype tab, select the first default state of this component, and I'm going to create a thread down to the second. If you don't want to do it like this and it's very difficult to create a thread here, I would really advise you to use the default interaction panel. So you'll select the first default state of this component, switch to the prototype and click on this plus button to create interaction. On this interaction, I want it to be an after delay. And the after delay, I want it to be 0 milliseconds. So I want it to immediately start creating our animation. And then for the action, I want it to change to, and it's going to change to the second variant because there's only one variant on this component. So variant 2. I want it to be a smart animate, and I want it to be an easy out of 300 milliseconds. Let's leave the default animation and see how it looks. So I'm going to close this up. What we want to do is to replace this particular hero section with this one that we just created. But before I do that, I don't want us to tamper with this particular landing page design that we have here. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to create a different page, which is page 2, and I'm just going to paste it so that we have all our components safe in case we need any of these elements while we are creating our edit. So I'm then going to select this particular default state that we created, and I'm going to come to the original hero section landing page here, right click, and I'm going to paste to replace. Once you've done that, let's look at what the prototype looks like by selecting this landing page, creating a starting flow point on it, and then we can go ahead to prototype this. So you can see what it looks like. If I hit R to restart, you can see what we just created. So this is quite fast. I don't know if this is okay, but we can just leave it like this. So the next thing we want to animate is the top navigation bar and also all of these elements that are here. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to select this top navigation bar. We are going to need to take note of the top navigation bar. If you switch to the design panel, you're going to see that the height is 93. We can round it up to 100. I'm going to come to the y-axis section here and give it a minus 100 so that it just goes up. And once it's coming here, it's going to be as if it slides down. So I'm going to go back to our prototype and I'm going to hit R, and you can see the kind of transition we are having. So the next we want to create an animation on is these elements that we have here. So back here in our designs, what we want to do is to make sure that the elements in this initial state are currently not visible so that when we switch to the next variant, it feels as if the elements just slides into the design. So what we are going to do is to move all of these elements like out of this artboard, but I don't want to do this manually, so I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to try and use the x-axis. So for this x-axis, the first one, I'm going to make it 600. I think it's going to the right, so I'm going to make it minus 600. For the second one here, I'm also going to make it minus 400. I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to do minus 400. So I'm going to do the same thing to the items or the assets on the right. Here, I'm going to make this 600. I think I'm going to make it 800. I'm going to do the same thing for this really big one, 2000. And I'm going to do the same thing for this, and I'm going to make it 800. So majorly to just move everything out of the artboard. And for these stars, I'm going to make this 0%. I'm going to select this, change this down to 0%. Do the same thing here, down to 0%. Do the same thing here, down to 0%. So once we go back to our prototype and hit refresh, we can have this initial transition, which is super cool. So from here, I don't want it to just be still. I want these assets to keep moving slightly. So what I'm going to do is to switch back to our animations, and I'm going to create a different variant. I'm going to select this particular one and hit plus to create another variant to this. And for this variant, I'm just going to move these assets around on the screen, but because of the way the design is looking, you can see that the assets feel as if they are orbiting around the text. I'm going to try as much as possible to maintain that orbit. So what I'm going to do is to move some of these assets up a little bit like this. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. The same for this. I'm going to move it up a little bit. The stars here also up a little bit. I might move this down a little bit. So you just want to play around with this. Basically for this, I'm going to bring it to the opposite direction, just like this. Then I'm going to do the same thing for this. I'm going to select this, move it up a little bit. Select this, move it up a little bit. This particular one, just bring it down a bit. This, I'm going to move it towards this direction a little bit. So once I have like created a little distortion on this particular asset, what I want to then do is to select this, go to the prototype and create an interaction on this. The interaction on this is also going to be an after delay, and it's going to be 0 millisecond because I want it to immediately go to this. And I want it to be an on-change, which is change 2, and it's going to go to variant 3. For variant 3, I want it to also be a smart animate, and I want the animation to actually be linear, and I don't want any kind of animation on it. I want it to be a linear transition. And I think 300 milliseconds, we'll just leave it at that to see what it looks like. Or in short, I'm going to move it to 2000 milliseconds so that it's really slow. And for this, I'm then going to revert it back to this. So I'm going to create an interaction on the third variant also. I'm going to give it after delay 0 millisecond. I want it to revert back to variant 2 immediately. It's going to be a change to, of course, I'm going back to variant 2, and the animation is going to be a smart animate, and it's going to be 2000 milliseconds. I'm going to close this up and go to our prototype and see what it looks like. So you can see the little movement on the assets on this particular board, which is what we are trying to achieve based on what your design looks like. You want to play around with the assets that are currently on the design. If I hit refresh, you can see this is really nice. Next, we want to be able to move to the next section. And on this next section, we also want to have like an animation on it. And we're going to keep going like that for all the other sections. Now let's focus on this next section, which is this cards here. I'm going to go back to our designs. So since we are done with the hero section, I'm going to select this hero section and move it all the way to the left, just like this. Once we have that, the next is this particular section here that have these cards. I'm going to create a duplicate and bring it to this. Now focusing on this, this is going to be a really simple interaction. We're just going to go ahead to create a component out of this, and then we are going to create a variant. So for the default state of this, I'm going to select all of these cards, and I'm going to move them down a little bit. I'm just going to use the arrow key because I don't want to move them down too much. So I'm just going to move them down a little bit, and I'm going to change the appearance here to 0. So after changing the opacity here in the appearance to 0%, the next thing we want to do is to create our animation from this particular section down to this section. So I'm going to select this first one here, which is the default variant, and I'm going to switch to the prototype, and I'm going to add an interaction to this. The interaction is going to be on mouse enter because we want this section to create that animation effect as soon as the mouse enters the section. Typically, you want your section to be a lot bigger in terms of its height so that your mouse quickly enters the section. But I'm just going to work with this design without making any alteration. So for mouse enter, it's going to be a change 2, and we're going to be changing to variant 2, and it's going to be a smart animate, and I'm just going to leave the figures of the animation just like that. I'm going to close this up. So from here, I'm going to select the default state here, and I'm going to come to this particular section, right click and paste to replace. Once we have this, I'm going to go back to our prototype, and I'm going to restart this from the beginning. Then once we scroll and once our mouse enters this section, we get this really nice effect. I hope you guys can see it. So this really nice effect, you can do the same thing based on whatever your design is in this section. So we've been able to achieve an animation on the hero section and on this card section. The next section we are going to is this text section. And by now, I believe you guys are getting the gist of the whole animation when you're animating your landing page. It is quite easy. All you need to do is to create like an interactive component and use that interactive component for each section. But this is best done when your landing page is completely done so that you don't have troubles when you have to create a new design or alter the design. So for this section, of course, we're going to hold create a duplicate as usual. I'm going to select this, select the most outermost frame. You can see that this is an auto layout frame. I'm going to remove it from an auto layout frame by clicking on that, remove auto layout. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm also going to select the frame in it, right click, and I'm going to ungroup to remove the frame around it. I'm going to select the text here, right click, and then I'm going to frame selection. Then for that selection, of course, you can see that the height of this is 152. I'm going to round it up to 155. I'm going to select the text inside the frame because we just wrap the frame around it. And for that text, I'm going to move it 155 so that the text goes down. Select the frame again, and then I'm going to clip its contents. I'm going to do the same thing for this text, right click, frame selection, select the text inside the frame, and move it, let's say 60, because the height is 56, as you can see here. Select the frame itself, clip its contents, do the same thing for the button, just like this. Select the button itself. You can see the height is 56. We can just move it by 70 downwards. Select the frame and clip its content. Once we have this, I'm going to select this block, create a component. Then I'm going to add a variant to this. So we have variant 2. In this variant 2, we're going to select all the text. If you can't see the text in your frame, you can use the layers panel here. Open it up. Here we have the button element itself. You want to revert it back to 0. Here we have this description text. You want to revert the y-axis back to 0. Here we have the main text here, which is the main title text. You want to revert it back to 0. This is quite easy. Select the first frame. Once you're done reverting it back, switch to the prototype menu, create an interaction. It's going to be a mouse enter, and the mouse enter is going to be changed to, we want to change to variant 2, and we want it to be a smart animate. We're going to leave everything as it is. Once you've done that, copy the first instance, come here, paste to replace, and you have something like this. Once we check our prototype back, let's restart from the beginning. We can see when we get to the second section, we get this smooth animation. Once we get here, we get this smooth animation. So another thing I noticed is the fact that the animation here on this section seemed to be a little fast. So I'm going to go to our web, select this default components that we created. I'm going to open up the interaction and then set this to 200 milliseconds. Once I do that, I'm going to go back to our prototype and restart our prototype. Then I'm going to go back to that particular section to see if that helps. So you can see that we have a little delay and we are able to conveniently see the transition in this section. So I think that's good. So the next thing we want to do is this particular section, and we need to be really quick with this so that we don't waste so much time. So after doing this, I'm just going to move this particular block to this section. I'm going to select this and I'm going to create a duplicate just like we've been doing with other sections. And for this section, we want to look at the way the items or the elements in this section is designed so that we can create a transition that fits that particular pattern. So having an item on the left and on the right, the best way to create a transition here is to make these items come from like left and right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this first asset here, and I'm going to switch to the design and move this by -1000. Let's see where it goes. So it goes like completely out of the frame itself. I think that's too much. So I'm going to reduce this to -800 to see if that's better. So I think that's better. I'm going to select this and I'm going to move it to, let's say, 1500 all the way to the right. So I'm going to select this frame and make sure it is out of the frame. But from here, it doesn't seem to be out of the frame. I'm going to select it and make it 2000. So here it seemed to be out of the frame. I'm going to make this frame a component and I'm going to create another variant. And for this variant, I'm going to select the items in it also. Here we have the text. Here, I'm going to revert it back to what the initial value was. So now the problem is we can't remember the initial value. So I'm going to come here and select this existing design here to see what the initial value. We have 850 for the initial value of this. So I'm going to select this, go back to the text and make this 850. Then I'm going to check the position of the image element here, which is 150 or 151. Then I'm going to select this, select the image, and I'm going to change this back to 150. So having this, I think we've been able to successfully create this. So I'm going to select the entire default component here, switch to the prototype, open up an interaction. It's going to be a mouse enter, of course. I'm going to create an action that is going to be a change to, and we want to change to variant 2. Is going to be a smart animate, and I want to have a delay of 200 milliseconds, just like we did for the previous section. So once we've created our interaction, I'm going to copy this, which is the default component here, and I'm going to come to this section here, right click, and then paste to replace. Now I'm going to go back to our prototype, and I'm going to restart by hitting R on the keyboard and then start scrolling gradually so that we can see what our animation is like. So we can see this. This is also really nice. So for this text, you can go ahead and do the same thing we did for this particular text. You can do the same thing we did here to the text and also to the image. You can also do the same left and right interaction for this section, and you can do the same thing for this last section and leave the footer just the way it is. So that we don't take so much time, I think with this particular example, you should be able to create a fully animated landing page in Figma. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you've been able to learn a thing or two, and if you find this video helpful or any of my videos, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever I post a new video. Bye for now, and I'm going to see you guys in my next video.